It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Foreign editor Christopher Dickey is here. How are you?
I'm good. I always look forward to this.
All right. Always look forward to Fridays as well. Look forward to as well saying hello to freelance journalist Anne Bagam-Mary.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you back. Happy to have back as well Gregory Viscusi, reporter for Bloomberg News, who's been trying to keep up, he says, with France's globe-trotting president. We'll have more on that a little bit later on. And Alexis Poulain, co-founder of the magazine Le Monde Moderne, The Modern World, but not named after the song by British pop group The Jam.
Could be.
All right. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast, and where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, #World This Week. Now, it's become something of a holiday season tradition on par with Black Friday, Santas in malls, and the James Bond movie on British television Christmas Day, Vladimir Putin's annual marathon press conference. This one weighing in at 3 hours and 40 minutes. The event featured the usual placards begging for the Russian president's attention, grievances about roadway potholes, and as usual, there was always a moment of drama. This time there was no phone call from NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, but there was a question from socialite turned journalist and activist Ksenia Sobchak, who happens to be running against Putin as he seeks another 6-year term next March.
In this country, being an opposition politician means you'll either be jailed, killed, or something similar. Why is this the case? Are authorities afraid of fair competition?
There should be and there will be competition at the election. But it's a matter of radicalism. What constitutes a democracy is a matter that's open to discussion. But rest assured, we're not afraid of anyone.
And a bit of an odd exchange, because in that question, by the way, that was an edited version, Christopher Dickey. She asked him pointedly, why aren't you letting Alexei Navalny, the anti-corruption campaigner, run? Putin never mentions Navalny by name, but you saw his answer.
Sure. Well, his whole spiel in this press conference was that was something that also his spokesman had said earlier in the day, which is basically the opposition is not ripe yet. The competitors are not ripe enough to run against him. They're really sort of amateurs and crazy people. And when he talked about Navalny, made a reference to Navalny, he says, you know, he's sort of like Mikhail Saakashvili, who was the president of Georgia. Now he's not even a Georgian citizen. Then he was governor in Ukraine. I mean, in Ukraine, in Odessa. And he's not even a Ukrainian citizen anymore. And he's under arrest in Ukraine. He's this sort of flamboyant but difficult person. And basically, Putin was trying to say, that's what we're looking at with Navalny.
And what about this theater? Because you have Sobchak, who's on paper running against Putin in that election next March, asking him, and he fields the question from her and answers it.
Well, a lot of people think that she's got the tacit support, in fact, of Putin as in this, that it's not, she isn't a serious opponent. Nobody expects that she can win, that she can really challenge him. And I would say, actually, although the questions were very good, tough questions from her, she gained a lot of credibility, to the extent she's going to have any credibility, from her encounter with him at the press conference, and that may not be exactly what he doesn't want. He may want that.
He needs to have competition.
Yeah, and not a difficult one, not a dangerous one, I think. So
like
that's
Navalny.
why, as you say, Navalny was, but even the journalist here is quite young. She doesn't have full support, and the campaign will be difficult for her, I guess. And if you look at the power of Putin with the media in Russia, but also with RT, the channel that is launching in France this month and everywhere, the campaign has started worldwide for Putin, and internally is the continuity, is the guy who knows, is the expert, and the other will be just contenders and dangerous contenders that want power from the wise guys that is running Russia for so many years.
And the most dangerous contenders get killed.
Yes, and when they're dangerous, they get in jail or they get killed. That's the question. And there's no answer to that, saying, well, I don't want them to run because I might lose. So, yeah, it's an easy one.
Speaking of getting killed or thrown in jail. His former economy minister, Alexei Uliakayev, this Friday, sentenced to 8 years behind bars for a $2 million bribe. He denies, says he's innocent. Some call this, well, the first salvo, perhaps, in a power struggle that's going to mark the next 6 years of Putin.
Yeah, I mean, what's coming now will be the end of the Putin era. So there will be barons, there will be newcomers trying to get the money, to get the power. And you have already all this coming on with the Paradise Papers, and a lot of the money that is there comes from Russia, and you don't want to know from where. So clearly some people will talk or have talked or might threaten Putin to get more fierce into telling what's happening in Russia, and it will use the power, as always, as we said, threat and to some extent violence, pretending it's not, of course, the state, but we still have journalists that are not really covering the issue there. And it might get even more violent because of the sort of weighing power and the end of the full throttle Putin that we had before.
How did Putin seem to you, Anne Dagamari?
As he always has. One of the journalists I read reporting on this talked about how this press conference is kind of like Groundhog Day, the movie where the same day repeats over and over again until finally people understand, the main character understands what he has to do to get out of it. All Putin really has to do is run for election next year and then wait 6 years, and he's out of it. He's term limited. This is the last election in which he can stand, unless, of course, he changes the rules. And what a lot of the commentary you're seeing about the next Putin era, the end of the Putin era, is that really will be the end of the Putin era because he's playing the long game. He doesn't want to stay too long and then get thrown out and possibly thrown into jail. So this theater that he plays every year, really you can see as setting up whatever's going to happen in the next year. And this year it's going to be his election, and then it'll be the struggle for succession, and then it'll be Putin feathering his nest for what happens after his next 6-year term.
Theater, but those questions that we were a little bit glib perhaps at the outset here about things like potholes, this is the occasion when people can ask them.
That's true. And if you are trying to show that you should retain your seat, that whatever forces are struggling against you in the world or inside your own country should not go too far to take you on, a little veneer of democracy and listening to the people is probably a very useful thing. There may be something real in those questions, but it's also in his interest to look like he's listening.
Is he already a lame duck president?
No, I don't think he's a lame duck president at all. I mean, he may only have a 6-year term, but he's perfectly capable of being the éminence grise, of being the power behind the throne for many years after that. Look, I mean, he gave up the presidency once. Did anybody have any doubt about who was the real power in Russia? We might have had Medvedev as president, but in fact, the real power was the prime minister. Then it was Putin.
And one final question about this press conference, which is the newswire is reporting on how some of his remarks eerily mirror those of Donald Trump when it came to,
when it came to Donald Trump?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Sure, he was basically parroting the kinds of things that Trump says, or maybe Trump is parroting Putin.
I was going to say it's more of that, but anyway.
But one of the things that Putin said was that the U.S. economy is booming, and therefore anybody who has any questions about whether the current regime in America is doing a good job just should look at the numbers. And frankly, that is a narrative that holds the root, as they say in French, in America. Prosperity trumps morality. And so
morality, yes.
But it was kind of funny to see Putin referring to the U.S. stock market, sort of an odd sort of.
Sure, especially since his own economy is doing so well.
And the two of them are in lockstep.
Two of them in lockstep when it comes to the stock market. But is the tide turning against Donald Trump? In Alabama, a state that he won by 28 points a year ago, a Democrat elected to the Senate for the first time in more than a quarter century, Doug Jones defeating Christian conservative Roy Moore. Moore had been backed until the end by Trump and the far right of the Republican Party. This despite allegations he dated girls as young as 14. On Capitol Hill back in Washington, meanwhile, some Republicans openly hailing the victory of a Democrat.
Strange to say, I guess, from my side of the aisle, but I thought it was a great night for America. So I couldn't be more happy.
It was a good night.
What message did the election send last night? The election.
Alabamans didn't want to
somebody who dated 14-year-old girls.
Is that the real conclusion? Are we making too much of this?
I think we're making too much of it because let's not forget a guy who, even before the accusations of molesting 14-year-old girls came out, believes that homosexuals should be banned, that Muslims should not be allowed to serve in government. Still came
in Alabama.
Still came within, he came within 1% of winning, and with the difference only made up by write-in notes. But I do understand those Republicans, because in a certain way, I think it might have been better for the Democrats, and you could argue, if Moore had won, because it would have just put the Republican Party into such an embarrassment. It would have had this sort of hanging over Trump that here's a man who, supports, a candidate who molests children. And now that's all forgotten. It's all going to be forgotten.
Well, it's all forgotten, and I think the Republicans would have found a way to clean house and then appoint a new senator in Alabama. They could have easily done that. And then they would have been rid of Roy Moore, and they would still have that vote, but it was which they won't have now.
It was kind of a win-win situation for the Democrats, though, one way or the other.
Maybe, but I think my sense is that things really are changing in the United States. I think he was a special candidate, for sure.
Yeah, he would have won without the accusations.
Without the accusations.
A guy who believes in banning gays and banning Muslims would have won.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that's fascinating to watch is the rising consciousness of American women. There were and American women who are not just in the cities, not just in cosmopolitan environments. You disagree, Anne?
I don't disagree that there is a rising consciousness among women in America. What I do disagree about is that women turned the tide in this election.
No, black voters turned
the tide in this election. And black voters, I would posit, were going to vote for Jones anyway because of his history of prosecuting Ku Klux Klan members. I mean, he was very much...
but they might not have turned out in such numbers.
No, more turned out to vote for Jones than turned out to vote for Obama.
The Get Out the Vote organization in the Democratic Party among black populations is pretty well established and has been going on for a long time and has been very successful at getting out the black vote. It's not something that's reported a lot, but it's very true. In this case, it really kicked into gear, and that made the difference. No, I think that it would have been, it's hard to see how this could have been any worse for the Republicans than to have this happen. What this does is invalidates the sort of playbook that says whatever accusations, whatever truthful accusations come your way, just deny them, just cast doubt on the accusers, and you will prevail. That is what has propped up the president. That is what's propped up a number of initiatives that the Republicans have put out there and candidates they put out there. This was the first time it really didn't work. I mean, this is, in a way, this is a triumph of the black voter organization and getting out the vote. It's also a triumph of people finally listening to what the facts are and the reporting of the facts. And I think that has undercut a lot of what the Republicans have been counting on to propel their agenda.
So what you're saying is that 2016, a Twitter election, people, don't know how to filter the noise. Now they do?
Yes, I think that's one of the big changes. I think people are getting better at filtering the noise.
Well, and I think there's another key element here, and it's also what we saw in New Jersey, particularly in Virginia, is that a lot of people find Trump weirdly entertaining. But what works for Trump doesn't work for the Republicans. It doesn't work for them at all. So I think you're going to see again and again that people who try and be Trump without being Trump are not going to do well. And that is very ominous from the Republican point of view.
There's only one Trump, and he's great. He's the greatest.
Oh, he's wonderful. So entertaining.
You can't mock Trump, yes.
And Alexei, do you agree with Anne's point about
the end of fake news?
About citizens are better at filtering?
I don't know. I think it's because it was a local election to start with. Maybe social networks are not so much involved. I think there is a lot of groundwork compared to a national election. Or maybe Facebook already put some filter ahead and saying, let's not do this again. I think the size and the scale of the election might be the difference. You'll find that the big national election, people will still stick to fake news, support a candidate, whatever, because they want something to happen. Or because Trump is entertaining, you see him a lot on TV. On this scale, I think there's a lot of groundwork, there's a lot of people actually talking, a lot of meetings, and it's very different.
Do you remember, Alexei, people said, oh yeah, the same thing's going to happen in France. Of course, it didn't really, did it?
No, it didn't. But it was. I mean, we still had Marine Le Pen in the second round, so she managed to be there.
But not thanks to fake news.
Well, thanks to the fact that people just, stick to emotions more than reasons during these big elections, and they don't listen. And actually, if you're a candidate, you use emotion, you use the fact that people are hungry, the fact that there is something happening and you want to change things, even if things change in the long terms. And that's what triggers people votes. It's that they feel that they have something to do. There's a mission there. In local election like this one, I think that it's not so much the mission, but what's going to happen next in the territory, and who's the best to actually make the economy or the local system works.
I think we ought to look at the possibility also that on the national level, but also at the local level, that precisely the Republican victory in Congress, if they get this tax bill through, although it's not a very popular tax bill,
and it's not a foregone
but from the
conclusion
Republican point of view, that's what the true believers in the Republican Party wanted. They wanted that tax bill.
The true believers or the donors?
Both.
Okay, there's a difference.
That's your core Republican. I don't mean the true
believers.
So what?
Once they've got the bill, they throw Trump under the bus?
I think it's a lot easier to throw him under the bus once they've got the bill.
Well, especially since he's backed 3 losing elections up until now.
Yeah, exactly.
His toe-tails
so he's
aren't very
becoming a
long.
liability. As the mainstream Republicans get what they want, and the holy grail of republicanism is tax cuts.
Yes.
As they get what they want.
But for the donors, not for the working class people who voted for Trump. They said this tax bill does not benefit them, and I think they see through it. If you look at the polls, they see through it.
I wish that were the case, but it's not
Trump's
the case
support
at
is
all.
only about 35%. So that's not what we're talking about. One reason it's only 35% is because mainstream Republicans don't like him that much. They don't love him, but they do love tax cuts. Once they've got those tax cuts, I think a lot of them are going to go, this guy's an increasing liability.
I wish that were the case, Greg, that middle class and lower earning Republicans were looking at this tax bill and saying, this doesn't benefit me. I feel betrayed. I'm going to change my vote. I'm not going to go to the polls anymore in support of a Republican candidate. I think there's magical thinking that goes on for anybody who votes Republican who isn't already a millionaire, because this is not a party that really has the middle class and lower income worker voter at heart. And I think that the history of the Republican Party.
The tax bill is structured so there will be benefits realized by the middle class in the first 5 years.
For a few
and
years.
after that,
But try to sell in an election. Try to sell people on the idea that 4 years from now you're going to have big problems. That's not the way people vote. That's what Alexei was talking about. They vote for emotion. And if they're getting an extra $2,000 in their back in their taxes,
it's short-term win.
But it's so much less than what you receive if you're a pass-through.
But that's not the way people think when they vote.
All right, we're going to see how people think when they look at the long term when it comes to saving the planet. And we're talking about taxes. How about financing saving the planet? Something that was brought up here in Paris at a summit. We'll be talking about it when we come back in The World This Week.
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
In January 2011, thousands of Egyptians converged on Tahrir Square to protest against a society riddled with corruption and police violence. After days of demonstrations, some 850 people were killed and thousands injured. The regime fell. Today, citizens are plagued by the economic crisis. Politics has taken a backseat. Some Egyptians don't want to forget. They're sharing their revolutionary experience with new generations.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
This report has been awarded the Ricardo Ortega Memorial Prize 2017 of the United Nations Correspondents Association. Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
Freed from jihadist occupation in January 2013, Timbuktu has struggled to recover. Despite the permanent presence of French and Malian forces, the threat remains. Ongoing intimidation and the presence of jihadist sleeper cells are a cause for concern. Can Timbuktu cast out its demons and wipe away the stains of occupation?
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
Hey, you're at the hotel.
Hello, son, it's Grandpa.
We've just arrived.
Oh,
the trip was a bit long, but
Oh,
the
so
weather
nice
is ever
of them.
so nice.
Hi, Granny. It's me.
For grandparents who just want to say hello, IBIS offers unlimited high-speed Wi-Fi. IBIS, for you, you and you. Book on ibis.com or accorhotels.com.
Welcome back. Before we resume the world this week, some of the stories we're following for you in the newsroom after being disowned by the White House. The U.S. Secretary of State tones down his offer of unconditional talks with North Korea. Rex Tillerson says yes to negotiations, but he tells the UN Security Council that a sustained cessation of threatening behavior must come first. EU leaders unanimously approved terms of divorce with the UK, but warn phase 2 of Brexit negotiations will be even tougher. The formal trade talks to open in March. A guilty verdict, an 8-year bribery sentence for Vladimir Putin's former economy minister, Alexei Ulyakayev's downfall seen as a consequence of a Kremlin turf war. Silicon Valley giants roundly denounced the decision to end net neutrality. In business, Delano D'Souza will tell you what the impact of a multi-speed internet debit could mean for Europe. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Present foreign editor Christopher Dickey. How are you?
Good.
Welcome back as well to freelance reporter Anne Bagamary. We're also in the company of Gregory Viscusi, journalist and reporter for Bloomberg News, and Alexis Poulain, co-founder of The Modern World. Not the concept, but the publication, the digital publication. Here in Paris this week, there was the One Planet Summit, a summit hosted by Arnold Schwarzenegger, or at least that's how it seemed. The Hollywood star and former governor of California arriving on one of those public sharing bicycles. There he is. You could see him there. He was greeted by the Paris mayor when he arrived. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to be in the frame with Arnold, including France's president during the cruise ride on the Seine that concluded the summit. One team cheering for One Planet in front of a blue and green Eiffel Tower. Okay, we don't see it, but it is there, says Macron. Schwarzenegger playing on the fact that Donald Trump wasn't invited to the Green Financing Summit.
It doesn't matter that Donald Trump backed out of the Paris Agreement, because the private sector didn't drop out, the public sector didn't drop out, universities didn't drop out, scientists didn't drop out, engineers didn't drop out, no one dropped out. Donald Trump pulled Donald Trump out of the Paris Agreement, so don't worry about any of that.
Gregory Viscusi?
Well, he's right. I mean, he's really right. I mean, coal is not going to come back in the U.S. because it's not economical. Trump loves coal, but the businesses that burn it don't, because it doesn't make money.
And was this the Schwarzenegger show?
He was really good, I have to say. He really did give some speeches, and he explains things in a he really does. He has a great way of explaining things on this subject. I got to say, he really was good. But hand it to Macron, huh? This was a summit where really not much happened. There wasn't much decided. And 50 heads of state and 50 heads of government were there. Tons of people were there. You really got to hand it to him that he created this big buzz over kind of nothing.
Well, there were
a lot of traffic jams.
Hang on, there were big announcements. There was big insurance and companies and banks that said they were going to divest from fossil fuel investment.
They already do it.
They already do it.
You don't save the planet taking selfie with former Hollywood stars. It's stupid. And what they did was a big show to the glory of Emmanuel Macron with Make the Planet Great Again. So it's like following and being like the contender to Trump. Clearly, it's part of... I don't know, but the world leaders that were here just stayed for a day. You don't work during a day. You just come in, talk about the kids, the weather, and you go. And you say, take some selfies and pictures. And all the announcements that were done, it's something that already happening. Finance, they already work into the green solutions. Then all the Bill Gates of this world, they already try to give and do things. It's just announcements saying, look, we're great, but there is no new step to this. The COP22, the COP23, this is keeping on. But what was this summit about, apart from taking selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower? That's my question.
It was a fundraising gala.
Yeah,
it was
much.
like any other organization that wants people to get out their checkbooks and write a check, and then they throw a party for them to say thank you.
Hang on a second.
No, okay.
Next year there's going to be a very tough UN the annual UN summit is going to be tough because they're going to be talking about how you finance the switch to renewable energies, and at this summit they really put this in the public limelight.
Okay, I'm not saying that there's something wrong with having a gala and saying thank you for opening your checkbooks, because the private sector, including your boss, Mr. Bloomberg, really gets the ball rolling. And it is true that it shows that America is not the sum total of its president.
Yeah.
Donald Trump can pull out, but there are plenty of other people willing to step up and work for climate change, or for against climate change. Thank you.
The truth is,
but yes, the truth is.
Well, he was talking in front of head of states and saying that some states behind me will disappear in 50 years, and then at the same time, France is cutting some funds, climate funds, to help this kind of issues. So again, it's a lot of words. It's a lot of saying we're great, we're doing this, but how are the action up to the challenges? And I'm sure.
But come on, there's the opening of the Solar Alliance with India. There's the discussion with the private sector, which was where they talked about.
It's been ongoing.
Yeah, this is just basic business sense.
Yes,
I mean, we're moving towards.
So why do you make
we're moving towards renewables. That's where the business is.
But I do think every so often you have to have an event that gets people's attention, and clearly this did. We're sitting here discussing it right now.
But did it get people attention?
Yes,
apart from France.
What it did, what I think it did, was to, and I think that Schwarzenegger's remarks were right on the money, as it were.
Oh, you're saying US
I think it validated the idea that we're saying that lots of other people are stepping in. It may be that they're all stepping in, but it said to the world, look, here, and they're not only stepping in, but here they are. Here are people from the private sector. Here are people from cities, which are a huge part of this. And yes, they're heads of state, but you don't have to have just heads of states. You can have these other elements. That was, to me, the point of the summit.
The turnout was incredible. I mean, you couldn't move in that place, and it was people.
You couldn't move in the city.
You couldn't move in the city. It was people from government. It was from businesses, from organizations, from city states. I mean,
that's the magic of Richard Attias. You know, he's good at creating events where you got thousands of people. He does that in Qatar. He does that in Paris, in New York. I mean, this is the Attias magic.
But François makes a good point in that there is a serious public initiative going on that is trying to take the tough decisions. And the OECD has just published a report talking about private-public partnerships in support of climate change, and talking about how public money is really more important than private because it's more reliable. When you've actually voted on a treaty and you're holding yourself to it. No disrespect to any wealthy private individuals who want to take this who employ Greg and who want to make this their cause. But the fact is, it can change tomorrow. Public support, public money is incredibly important for something that's long-term.
I'm not sure it changes tomorrow. I mean, if you're an energy company, you've got to get on the bandwagon. I mean, it's the fossil fuels do not. Yeah, it's
the end of fossil fuels. So you have to prepare for
what's
next. Great.
One final question about the host of this summit, because Emmanuel Macron had hosted that summit, hosted a summit on the
Sahel the next day,
security in the Sahel.
West Africa, yeah.
There was the summit in Brussels. Last week there was a summit on Lebanon. There was a trip to Qatar. How does he do it?
He doesn't sleep. He's young. He's younger than us. He turns 40 next week. But still, no, he just has an amazing. I mean, I think it's two things. One is just an amazing energy level, and then just an intellectual ability to juggle all those things. It is extraordinary. My brain would hurt. I mean, I couldn't. Just covering him, your brain hurts.
All right. The star of the summit that broke up in Brussels earlier this Friday was for once supposed to be Theresa May. But the party in Brussels to fet a deal on phase 1 of Brexit, those terms of divorce, was dampened by cheering from a different quarter.
305.
11 Tory rebels, with the backing of the opposition, passing through Parliament late Wednesday an amendment that gives much more say to lawmakers in the Commons over the Brexit process. Anne Bagamary, again, it's a bittersweet end to what was the heavy lift of phase 1.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to ask yourself, though, how heavy was the lift? I mean, what you see is Theresa May claiming victory and preparing to divide the field. What you've got back in Britain is a lot of people in her own party who are very disappointed at what she said she was going to get in phase one and what she ended up getting. And I think a good example of that is Ireland. One of the big sticking points in the Brexit divorce has been, will Britain still be bound by EU trade rules and customs rules? What Theresa May has done in promising that there will be no hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, in other words, between Britain and the EU, effectively guarantees that Britain has to abide by EU trade and migration rules. That is supposed to be a negotiating point in a hard Brexit. It's not a hard Brexit.
She's given up the game to phase two, is what you're saying.
Well, she walks a very, very fine line between trying to appease her hardliners who think one thing about what Brexit's going to be and what she can actually get in Brussels. And I think you saw that in a microcosm in these 48 hours where she was going to claim victory, that phase one is agreed, hooray for all of us. And then she finds out that back home, her own party is saying, well, wait a minute, hold on, we need another check and balance in here. We need Parliament to approve what you're doing.
I mean, if you thought what's come up to now was difficult, though, I mean, next year is going to be twice as difficult because, you know, let's not forget, half the people who voted for Brexit did it because they think the EU is too protectionist, and half did it because they think the EU is some sort of free-for-all that allowed in, you know, foreign goods and foreign workers, and she can't put those two together. No.
But last week, when it seemed as though the cliff edge was near, the hard Brexiters within her cabinet rallied behind her.
Because they've not got the final terms yet. I mean, their big thing is that they've got to, they just had to get over this hurdle so they could open up the next stage of negotiations about trade.
I don't think they know what's in the magic box. Nobody knows what's in the magic box.
Everything's in flux. And also, it's one of the part of the deal is that no part of the deal goes into effect unless the whole deal goes into effect.
Nothing's decided unless
So you're constantly stirring this mush around, and we're going to be doing that for...
And the timing is key. I mean, you know, it was like there is this summit, and then it's March, but then she said in front of the camera that the negotiations are starting now for phase two. Everything is, I mean, really fast for what Brexit is supposed to be, and it's the unknown. I mean, there's been no assessment reports on the opposite of what was claimed, and even the party is divided. They won't say it in front of cameras, but they are not clear about what Brexit is about.
They're not clear about what it's about. And Alexis, put on one final point on this. The bitter tone that we saw in the run-up to the referendum vote, it seems to be playing out again and again. There's that Daily Mail front page we saw Thursday with the 11 Tory rebels and that headline, "Proud of yourselves," increasing the possibility of a Marxist in number 10, the reference to Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. But this isn't the Britain that
Britain has to sort of, reshape and stop this. I mean, the Brexit campaign...
It's too late.
It's not.
Too late.
It's losing its identity to Brexit. The whole campaign was fake news and lies, mostly from the Brexit camp. And they agreed that, it's impossible, and the costs that they put on the table were absolutely made up, but they needed to win. So maybe they should just stop and think and say, well, look, maybe we should have another campaign where we actually discuss the facts, where we have the assessment reports, where we discuss how much it's going to cost to leave the EU. Because right now, what we're doing, the bankers disagree, the people working disagree, and a lot of people, half of the country disagree. Half of the country.
Half the country still disagrees. And
I mean, the bottom line, we've said this before, the bottom line is the more we go along with these negotiations, the more they're actually not leaving the European Union.
Exactly.
But what they're doing is entirely losing their voice in the European Union.
And the power. Yeah. And the power. And they're losing their commissioners, they're losing the MEPs, they're losing what was a beautiful machine for their business. And now look at Paris is getting the bankers.
And they had all the opt-outs they ever wanted.
And they're probably going to end up playing by EU rules anyway.
Which is why most of Europe is like, goodbye. Thank you for leaving.
Vladimir Putin's annual press conference, not the only Christmas treat this year. Wednesday saw the worldwide release of the 9th Star Wars movie, featuring Mark Hamill, the late Carrie Fisher. And as we saw at the first screening on Paris's Grand Boulevard, plenty of enthusiasm from the faithful.
Besides the fact that the franchise is becoming more and more profitable, to see it in this joyful atmosphere and with this sense of communion was very powerful. I loved it.
It's breathtaking. It isn't ruined by special effects. And the story is fantastic.
It was very enthusiastic. The people were clapping and screaming, and you could really feel that there are a lot of fans in there that really, you know, appreciated the characters that they knew from the originals, and like every time something great happened, they were like really, really excited. So yeah, it was amazing.
And Gregory Viscusi, we could announce it here, has been requisitioned by his children to go.
I'm going to, well, my daughter had to explain what's happened since the last Star Wars I saw, which was in 1980, The Empire Strikes Back. So I had a long explanation at dinner the other night, and again, my brain hurts.
At the London premiere, by the way, sitting alongside Princes William and Harry at the Royal Albert Hall, the big boss of the studio, Disney's Bob Iger. Now, you might say it's been a big week for Iger. On Thursday, the studio announcing the $66 billion takeover of Rupert Murdoch's Fox Entertainment. That means Mickey Mouse, Buzz Lightyear, Luke Skywalker now share the same office space as 20th Century Fox, National Geographic, and it's all with an eye to Netflix and Amazon, to video streaming site Hulu that Murdoch owned up to now.
Well, I think it's pretty clear today that consumers want access to entertainment, one, that is high quality, but two, they want access pretty much anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And it requires new technology to be able to deliver it in that fashion. Hulu certainly provides that, so the controlling stake in Hulu that we will acquire with this acquisition is one way to provide that.
Chris Radicki, your thoughts on this, this $66 billion deal?
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes it sound as if they paid $66 billion for Hulu. I don't think that's quite the case. They paid $66 billion not only for Hulu, but for all the content they get with 21st Century Fox, or it used to be 20th Century Fox, which has got a huge library. It's got a huge, huge number of films for content, and it's also a studio that produces a lot of content. I mean, when you look at what Netflix has been able to do, Amazon has been able to do, producing content when they had never been in that business before, it's amazing. But 21st Century Fox has been in that business. They produced a lot of good stuff, and I think that it's a good deal.
Yeah, well, and never forget, Disney has already announced it's going to be starting 2 new streaming services. Disney has already jumped into the streaming market with both feet. It's not just about blockbuster films. And let's face it, Star Wars, the latest Star Wars movie, is about the only thing you can think of right now that will reverse the trend of people not going to the theater to see a film. I mean, everybody wants to see it on the big screen. It's a big event. That's still not going to make the box office receipts come up from the 50% cut that they've taken in the last year or so. So Disney had already decided that the future was on a device. The future was not in broadcast. The future was certainly not going to be in the cinema. It was going to be on streaming services. And so this gets them the kind of content that they can use to really jumpstart their streaming services.
Yeah. But let's see what the competition authorities have to say about this. I mean, let's not forget that Trump jumped in and said he opposed the AT&T Time Warner thing.
That's because it was CNN.
But still, it's
because he hates CNN.
I know,
this is
but
his buddy Rupert Murdoch.
He jumped in on a case where it was a vertical merger. It was a merger between distribution and content. This one, which generally the authorities in the past have been more lenient about than vertical, than horizontal mergers, where it's
apples and apples, not apples and oranges.
This one is both vertical, it's both horizontal and vertical. So it's going to be very difficult for them to make a fuss about AT&T and Time Warner and not make some fuss about.
Okay, this is the Disney side of things. Alexis Poulain, did Rupert Murdoch sell at the right time? Does he know something that we don't in terms of getting rid of those big assets and that big back catalog that Chris
I don't know, maybe there's something. I think it's about the power and the size to get into the streaming business, and maybe Murdoch didn't want to go this way, so it's like too big, and there is a lot of money to get invested there. But I do agree with what you said. It's pretty much the end of the movie or the movie industry. It's a lot of series. The content will have to be produced, whatever. Even Star Wars right now, it's still like an event. But when you have one Star Wars per month, one Star Wars movie per month, people will get the fatigue, or they'll watch it home on a device.
I watch everything on an iPad Pro.
Yeah,
And I think about it, do I need to go to a theater for this? No, I'll just move the iPad Pro a little closer.
Hang on a sec. This is
fun, but the theater's
Christopher,
great,
wasn't this the same that was said in the 1970s when box office receipts were going down? People said, oh, TV is killing the movies. It didn't happen, of course.
Look at it. Look,
TV changed the movie business.
They go all the time. All the time the movies try to go through these sort of flips to get people in. How many times have they introduced 3D movies over the years? They were introducing 3D movies in the 50s.
There will be a place for the cinema. It's just not the outsized place that it's held up until now. There will be a change.
By the way, Fox's crown jewels include hit TV cartoon show The Simpsons, which not only predicted the election of Donald Trump in 2000, but also way back in 1998 in an episode entitled When You Dish Upon a Star, this merger
They're amazing.
Come about. It's
amazing.
Matt Groening is a Zen master.
I think I'm a big fan of The Simpsons. It's like it's a parallel reality from the world we live in, actually, and they have years of advance. But the fear with this merger with Disney getting The Simpsons is that will we get all the advertisement that we get with Star Wars cars, Star Wars this,
product placement.
Will we get the Homer Simpson car, the Homer Simpson mobile?
Yeah, of course we will.
Yeah, but that's terrible.
Fox News is not part of this merger.
No, but Morocco is not riding it to the sunset.
That's why I think the authorities will approve it. It's not political.
Could be raising money to go international on Fox. Could that be possible?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. And on that note, Gregory Viscusi, I want to thank you. I want to thank Christopher Dickey, Alexis Poulain, and Bagamary. Stay with us, please. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there. Just doing a bit of housekeeping.
You've stumbled upon a new website that's helpful.
Yes. If you're wanting to avoid perverts and miscreants, not in real life, I hasten to add, sadly, but if you're looking to avoid those kind of people in your viewing matter, whether it's television shows or movies, then Rotten Apples is the place to go. Because what you can do, it only launched on Monday, but it's proving hugely popular. Everybody's talking about it. And what you do is you type in your movie that you plan to watch, and if you want to know whether or not anybody's been accused of any sexual shenanigans, then you can check. Star Wars. Star Wars comes up as fresh apples because apparently nobody linked to the movie has had any accusations made against them. It's not the same across the board, it has to be said. If you're a fan of US political dramas, you'll be pleased to hear that The West Wing is still good to go.
Okay.
However, I'm sure you can guess what I'm going to put in here next.
I think I know.
Yes, House of Cards, of course, comes up very differently indeed. It does come up as Rotten Apples because of Kevin Spacey. Now, what the
you click on the link.
You click on the link, and it takes you to articles that give you details about what exactly he's been accused, or he or she has been accused of doing. So it's an interesting way to really know exactly what it is that you're watching. There are even some present-day politicians involved in this too, because when you look at Home Alone 2, Donald Trump gets a mention because, of course, he's facing plenty of allegations against him. So that comes up in Rotten Apples. No wonder Macaulay Culkin looks surprised there. And then looking at this one, though, it is interesting that they're not managing to keep up to date. There is such an avalanche of all these claims, of course.
But what do? Do they vet them? Do they, or is it just anybody can launch an accusation?
Well, if you look at the bottom here, they say, please let us know if we've made an error. Now, this is the guy who made Super Size Me, photographed in the background there, Morgan Spurlock. Now, just yesterday, he took to Twitter to say that I am part of the problem. He went on to detail the fact that he has been accused of rape and sexual harassment in the past, and he basically said he was waiting. When will they come for me? So he decided to preempt it and write it all up on Twitter. That was only yesterday. And of course, this site hasn't been updated yet. And it's kind of understandable when you find out a bit more about where this site came from. There's a good article in Vanity Fair about this one. And it is actually 4 advertising executives from LA who've come up with this idea. There they are photographed. They are Becca Nuttall-Wagman, Annie Johnston and Justice Erlin. They came up with the idea in October. They're not trying to make any money from it. You'll notice there's no advertising on the site, despite the fact that's the genre that they work in. And they say that although you may feel like all shows right now are tainted, they reckon it's only 23% rotten apples out there. So it does rather put it all into perspective.
And Becca Murray, what do you think of that percentage, 23%? Is that high or low?
23% of shows do not have, or have someone associated with them who, is it high or low? You know, it's not my world. Let's let time reveal itself, and sorry, I'm going to pass.
we don't really have anything to compare this with. So.
No.
Indeed. Now, the other thing that a lot of people are talking about today, because it's coming towards the end of 2017, everybody's talking about what is the word of the year. Merriam-Webster came up with feminism. The Oxford English Dictionary, however, has come up with youthquake, which has surprised quite a lot of people.
Because I don't know what it means.
No, absolutely. It means a significant cultural, political or social change arising from the actions or influence of young people. Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. That's when the phrase was coined. And I'm a little bit... Well, I was a little bit at a loss myself.
Feminism was hardly a new word, and that got picked as word of the year.
Very much so. However, with the Me Too movement and the Women's March, feminism seemed like a good fit with 2017. Youthquake, not so much. Basically, it's all about this guy, Jeremy Corbyn, the UK opposition Labour leader, who generated a lot of interest in the younger generations in the last general election. And according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it produced a 5-fold increase in usage. They've created this graph to show us how popular it now is compared with 2016.
What about the kofefe? It's not in the dictionary. Kofefe would be the word of the year if it was in the dictionary.
I think that's probably my favourite.
Absolutely.
That's my word of the year to me.
Lots of people very, very sceptical about this one. This guy saying the only time someone has used the term youthquake is while searching for what it means. That shows you. No searches at all up until the OED said it's the word of the year. Larry the cat, the Downing Street cat, says, retweet if this is the first time you've heard the word youthquake and think someone at the OED is just having a laugh.
All right. Well, thanks for that rejuvenating edition of Media Watch. I want to thank our panel. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.